By spring 1952, just a few months into the coronation year, Britain was blooming. The war had left the United Kingdom bankrupt, but the nation was fighting back. With a drive on building and export, the economy was being pushed into the black by hard work and long hours, much longer than our 37-hour weeks.
I think we were just coming off the 52-hour week. And then there was another review, and it was 48 hours.
And in 1952, almost everyone who wanted a job had one. This was a golden age of near full employment, with 96% of men in full-time work.
There were many jobs available throughout because a lot of the workers never came back from the war, did they? So firms were expanding, and you could leave on a Friday night and start another job on a Monday.
There was a very good reason why there was so much work. Britain was booming. It led the world in production of cars, heavy machinery, ships, and electrical goods. Indeed, factory order books were so full that by mid-1952, just under 20% of the entire population worked in manufacturing, primarily in the north of England. Often, one factory employed most of the community, and some northern firms even hired a human alarm clock to get workers out of bed. This Sunderland glass factory was a popular local employer, even if their health and safety measures left something to be desired. In fact, workplace deaths were almost 10 times higher in 1952 than they are today. But Britain was also moving towards a more technological future. On the 2nd of May 1952, the world's first passenger jet plane, the de Havilland Comet, opened its doors for business.
Everybody really sort of was excited about the technology of it. It was almost the same as space technology that came much later. It was an air of excitement.
The Comet launched Britain into the jet age and showed the world that British brains were just as valuable as their industrial brawn.
The Comet was, of course, a great achievement for Britain, and everyone was very excited and proud about it.
The business boom was making Britain change in other ways too. With more work than workers, the government encouraged people from Ireland and the Commonwealth to come and fill the vacancies.
There was enough jobs for everybody to go around with, even with the black and the Irish and the other nationalities coming in.
Tryphena Anderson was only 19 when she answered the call to come from Jamaica and work in Britain's new NHS.
When it was suggested that maybe I should go to England to learn nursing, it was no surprise that I said yes. I think it was a new adventure.
The medical centres of today look clean and efficient and attractive, and so do the nurses.
Driven by people like Tryphena, the NHS was transforming the health of British people. But some attitudes shocked the young nurse.
I took the tea over to this gentleman, and the next one in the bed says to him, "You have to watch these darkies, you know, they'll steal the milk out your coffee." Well, that, he might as well have slapped me.
In spite of the racism they encountered, workers like Tryphena stuck to their jobs and helped sow the seeds for modern, multicultural Britain. In 1952, many elements of working life were different to today. Most people were paid cash in hand, not to dodge the taxman, but because bank transfers were unheard of. And there was no chance of seeing someone heading to work wearing jeans.
There was a great emphasis on looking smart and being tidy, not wearing your hair too long if you were a man, and unless you were very bohemian. And then people would look at you and say, "He must be an artist."
And most people you know, the male population wore collars and ties and headgear. Trilbys were the great thing of the day. And there were a lot of bowler hats about. I mean, people who worked in the city and in business and so forth, bowlers were quite the thing in those days.
The collar would have been a white stiff collar, and then I would have had to wear a bowler hat and a pair of gloves and a roll umbrella. So that was de rigueur in those days. And most people wore a hat. They don't these days. And on Reading Station this morning, hardly anyone was wearing a tie.
Only 2.5 million people owned cars, so most workers took public transport.
There was plenty of public transport, and there was a local train as well. So you had the choice. At night time, the queues trying to get home at 5:30 at night were tremendous.
And they're off to get good places in the bus queues for home.
For longer journeys, steam trains were still running and had plenty of affordable seats.
Commuting was less prevalent than it is today. It was quite easy. There was no problem about it. In those days, from Reading to Savile Row, it took an hour and a half, door to door. And it now takes an hour and 15 minutes.
For most people, the working week only ended at Saturday lunchtime. Then, like today, thousands of fans headed to football grounds to cheer on their team. Even top players didn't earn much more than supporters. No footballer received more than £14 a week, or around £20,000 a year in today's money. Many workers would then finish off their Saturday in the pub, paying the princely sum of 9p, about £2, for a pint. But on a Sunday, the country came to a standstill.
Seems hard to believe now that on a Sunday, absolutely everything was closed on a Sunday. I mean, everything. Even the swings were tied up in the park, so children weren't even allowed to enjoy a swing. And therefore, church became our social life. That's where we saw our friends. That's where we saw the boys.
National church attendances were starting to drop, but many parents still insisted their children attend Sunday services.
I do suspect there might have been an ulterior motive on the part of my parents to send me off for that part of a Sunday afternoon, but I can only surmise. Because it would have been the only time that they had any privacy.
As the British spring of 1952 moved into summer, many young people began to have romantic thoughts.
In the spring and summer, it was the ideal time. As they say, the parks were lovely. It was the right time to go and hold a young lady's hand. We never had any money, so you'd occasionally say, would you like to come for a walk?
Dance halls were also popular romancing spots.
There was a spell when young ladies used to wear Angora sweaters. And when you danced close and they went away, you were left with two big rings on your beautiful serge suit. And in a darkened dance hall, you wouldn't know, so you'd get home and your mother would take one look and your father would say, oh, had a good night.
Another favourite haunt of courting couples was the cinema.
It was lovely to go to the cinema and sit in the back and hold hands and so forth. And maybe some people did a bit more. Some of those on a necking went on, as we called it in those days.
Courtship, on the whole, tended to be a lot more innocent than today.
We used to hold hands and walk about. Might exchange the occasional kiss, but there wasn't that sort of openness in showing affection and mucking about sort of thing that there is today.
The arrival of summer saw people across Britain head off for their annual holiday. Before cheap package deals, almost everyone holidayed in the United Kingdom, and most destinations were reached by coach or train.
One of the joys, one of the luxuries that we had, and this was almost quite out of step with our circumstances, was to have a meal on the train. Now that was really quite exceptional, being treated like royalty.
Most holidaymakers headed for the seaside. And there was one resort whose delights and tower stood head and shoulders above the rest: Blackpool. Blackpool had something for everyone, whether it was the circus, the illuminations, or the fun fair. But Blackpool's biggest appeal lay in its golden sands.
Millions in East Lancashire poured into Blackpool. It was the big resort, and the whole of Blackburn, Burnley, Bolton would get on trains into Blackpool and Morecambe, and they really loved it. It was such a change to see the sand and the sea.
Families stayed in B&Bs to give mum a break from cooking. But in the days before internet sites offered travel advice, people took their chances.
Some landladies were lovely. Others had a fearsome reputation. You've had your breakfast. Right, now get out. It's at 10 o'clock, and don't let me let you see you, because I can't let you come back in again till 6, and then your tea will be on the table at past, all right?
That summer of 1952, most seaside resorts hosted one event as the climax of their holiday season: the local beauty queen contest.
They all paraded up and down beside the pool and did their little twiggles and turns, and then they were gradually voted out, and it was left with 3, I think. And then 2, and then you.
Yes, darling.
That's how it worked.
The winner was crowned queen and usually enjoyed an elaborate coronation ceremony. Another queen, Elizabeth II, spent much of her summer working, only managing to escape to Scotland that August. It was a break she needed after 7 grueling months. And when she returned to London, preparations for her coronation would start in earnest.
Mrs. Paradise is retiring today.
I bet your husband made a fuss of you this morning, eh?
I think a trifle, cheesecake.
Can I visit the bank of Mum and Dad?
Will you stop eating the cake?